Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so excited that you decided to join us for today's installment of our book marketing webinar series. And today is very special. It's the first time we've ever had a guest on this book marketing webinar series. Normally, Lucinda, what happens is people show up and they listen to me for a half an hour. Often I'm going really fast, but I'm glad to see many of you coming into today's event. As you're coming in, I hope you'll take a quick moment to say hello in the chat. Please remember to use the drop-down menu to select everyone so that everyone can see your comments. We'd love to know where you're calling in from. We'd also love to know what genre of work you do as an author. So if you want to tell us that in the chat, go ahead and find the chat, use that drop-down menu to select everyone, and then let us know where you're calling in from and what genre of work you do. So we have Todd in St. Louis who writes nonfiction. Hey, Todd, it's good to see you again. I'm noticing some business book authors who are here with us, my friend Jim and my friend Brenda. It's good to see you. Welcome, Allison in Alberta, Canada, who writes nonfiction. Sometimes it takes a few moments for people to arrive, but we're so glad that you're here. And as we get started today, one of the things I want to do is let you know a little bit about Lucinda Halpern. Lucinda is the president and founder of Lucinda Literary, and she represents authors writing in categories of business, health, lifestyle, popular science, narrative nonfiction, memoir, and upmarket fiction. You know, one of the things that's been interesting for me along the journey of supporting authors and marketing their books is that many times authors have these massive questions about what an agent does and how to get an agent. So I'm really glad that you decided to join us because I think that you can provide some really helpful information that a lot of authors may be lacking. So later on in the event, we will answer some questions that come into chat. So I want to invite you at any point today to go ahead and put those questions into the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. But as we get started, one of the things that we wanted to do is use a poll to engage our attendees. So I'm going to launch a poll, and we are curious about your experience with book proposals. The question is, have you ever crafted a book proposal? No, but I want to. Yes, or yes, and I want to craft another one. And I'm not able as the host of the webinar to answer the poll, but I'll tell you that I fall into that third category. Yes, I've written a book proposal, and yes, I want to write another one. I'll give you all a few moments to answer that poll. That way we'll know what type of background you bring to the conversation. All right, so let's take a look at these results. It looks like 3/4 of you who answered the poll have not crafted a book proposal yet. So today's webinar is going to be so exceedingly helpful to you. Only one of the people who answered the poll has crafted a book proposal before, and a few of you are like me, wanting to craft another. So as we move ahead, Lucinda, maybe you can tell us about some of the misconceptions you see in people who want to land a book deal.
Sure. So this is one of my favorite things to answer, actually, because I think there's a bad rap in publishing that you need to live in New York City or you need access to the insider network that is publishing. And it is a small world. It is tough to break in, but I firmly believe in the mission of my company is about if you have the right voice, if you have an existing audience, if you have a big idea, you will find your person and you will find your reader and you'll find your audience. So, so one of the more encouraging things I can say, and there's so much myth busting to be done, and hopefully that will come up over the course of the webinar, is if you live in Columbus, Ohio, Wichita, Kansas, that doesn't matter, right? Like you don't need to be at the center of publishing in order to break in. And the query process, which I can speak more to, is very challenging. It can be discouraging not to get response, but especially in our virtual world, does not matter where you are anymore, and doesn't even matter who you know as much as it used to.
That is really interesting. And I'm wondering, do you think that it's different at all for those people who might aspire to publishing with the bigger New York publishers? Does being in New York help in that case? And apologies in advance, my dog is losing her mind, so I'm gonna go back on mute.
So, you know, it's helpful if you can say to an agent or a publisher, I'm willing to meet you for coffee, but consider the pandemic right now. You know, no one's doing that in person. So all the more reason why a valuable email pitch and just getting someone into a conversation, which is really all you want to do with your book pitch. all you want to do is get an agent engaged with you, curious about your idea, and then you can go from there. I mean, especially our entrepreneurs in the group, they're used to selling their businesses and their ideas. So you want that critical conversation. You don't want to be ignored. Yeah, I think that, going back to the many myths that we can bust, another one that I hear all too often is, well, when I have the book, it's going to be different, meaning I'm going to have the audience, I'm going to have the publicity, I'm going to have the social media following. The publisher is going to do that for me. And this is like the most antiquated notion of book publishing that exists. The onus is not entirely on the author, because that's also a myth I hear. The publisher does nothing. It's all about what I do. That's not quite it either. But publishers are relying on authors to bring an existing platform or audience, especially in nonfiction, but we can talk about the ways it applies to fiction as well. They're counting on a big idea that's not niche, that breaks through, that's more universally applicable. And you have to bring those things to the table, even at the pitch phase. It's not about, the publisher is going to do this for me anymore.
Got it. Well, so thinking about myths and thinking about a couple of things you said, Lucinda, not every author I've ever worked with has had an agent. So at what point would you differentiate between the type of author who might need an agent or benefit from being represented compared to someone who might be able to get a book deal on their own?
So great question. And this is not, in any way selling the role of an agent, but there's so much more we do than broker a deal. And our primary goal is to protect the rights and careers of authors. So I sort of recommend that anyone at any stage in the process engage an agent. If you are clear you want to self-publish, an agent's probably not going to be interested in that proposition, because the way that we're compensated is on book advances and royalties, right? So that's, if you're clear about that path, no need to solicit agents. If you go the route of approaching independent publishers, there are many that will hear from authors directly. If you want a big five or even a number of the independents, they're relying on agents as gatekeepers and tastemakers to say, this is something credible, you should take a look. And agents have those long-standing relationships with publishers. So we're trusted by them. And then ideally, we're trusted by the client as well. So, a perfect time to engage an agent is right at the start of your querying process, if you're certain that you want a traditional deal, or you've now gotten a few offers. Like, this happens all the time. A writer has a great idea. They're found on, they did a profile on Inc., or they wrote an op-ed for, for Forbes or for the New York Times. And now publishers are contacting them proactively. What a great situation to be in. Offers are coming your way, big and small. People are talking to you. That's a primary time to engage an agent, because you say, I have the interest. I now need someone to broker the deal. Even when you're presented with a book contract, you don't want to just sign that. And you don't even want necessarily an attorney to just review it for you. You want someone who is advocating for you and navigating and educating you throughout the process of publishing.
That's really helpful. And so as we're talking about this idea of crafting a standout book proposal, at what stage of crafting the book proposal would someone engage an agent? And do you need to have that book proposal finished, completed, polished, wonderful before you come to an agent?
Yeah, sure. So the industry will tell you, and what you find online will tell you, that you should have that finished book proposal. And this is where fiction and nonfiction is different. As a fiction writer, you have to have that entire manuscript done, and ideally edited before you go to, from an outside editor or book coach, before you approach agents. For nonfiction, you should have a book proposal done, and a book proposal, which we'll expound on more, is basically a marketing document with content attached. That's what one of my favorite writers says. So it's a presentation document, which many of you might feel comfortable already providing, but you should have that done. And then, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, right? Because this is a business where beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's subjective. If I receive a pitch where there's a PhD, or there's a successful entrepreneur or CEO, and they have a really compelling idea that feels new and different and breakout to me, and they're just about to begin on the book proposal process, but they need that guidance, I will work with that person. I don't need that book proposal done for me to get intrigued and into a conversation. So in many ways, that's kind of an ideal scenario to engage an agent, because you can get that person's feedback. And then when you actually craft your book proposal, you'll have that insider perspective.
That's really helpful, Lucinda, and I appreciate you clarifying that. So, for an author who might be wanting to dive in and take the first step toward crafting a book proposal, what would you recommend doing, or how do you get started?
Sure. It's really thinking about the three critical elements, or what we call the three keys to a book deal, which is great writing, big idea, and platform. And by platform, for those who are not aware, what I really mean is existing audience, plus the potential reach of your audience. So maybe you have people in the Twitter sphere, blogosphere, corporate contacts, and they're going to be the loudmouths for your idea. It's not necessarily a hundred, million followers on Instagram. So if you have two of those things, again, platform, writing, crystal clear idea, you're in really good shape, well positioned to get a deal, but you need two of those three things. So that's where I would begin in crafting my book proposal. I'd take a hard look at what my audience is and what they crave from you. So a lot of authors in nonfiction will have done some road testing, right? They'll have the Facebook tribe, they'll have the following on LinkedIn, they'll maybe have a focus group. And instead of writing their life story, they're actually writing what their audience wants to hear most from them. So that's maybe where I'd begin. And then it's really doing your research, like what's out there, because as we say in the industry, like no new book is a new book. It's a new spin on a proven and popular concept. So what we hate as agents is you approach us, there are 5 other books, they're bestsellers that are doing what you've tried to do, what you're trying to do. That's a waste of everyone's time. So do the research first. What are the comps? What are the comparative titles that look like yours? That's how every publisher and agent is evaluating, placing a monetary value on your book proposition. So that's audience, that's idea to an extent, like is it new and different? Then it's having a really good template. So there are books, there are online tools. We have some of these tools through our website and our own events, but it's sort of a template of an introduction, which is a scene that hooks you in. Think about a literary reader, right? It's you're not watching this on television. You've got to hook people right away and keep the pages turning. So really go whole hog in making that opening scene very dramatic and high stakes. Believe it or not, this can be done for business books. We've done it a million times over. You don't just go right to the practical information, right? Like it's this scene, it's the microcosm of what you're trying to express. It's a bio that talks about your credentials. Like, why the heck should anyone trust you to write this book? Well, maybe you've been featured in the media. Maybe you have a PhD or went to, a great school and have an MBA. Maybe you have some sort of experience or distinct personality worth sharing in your bio. So that's your CV. It's then a table of contents. Now, editors will look at that table of contents and say, well, this feels done before, or they'll say, this seems pretty exciting. I understand the way this builds. Then it's chapter summaries, which could be, a paragraph in length down to 2 pages in length, really more fleshed out. It's a sample chapter so they can see how you write. And it's a marketing section, which is where you get to highlight all of the reasons people are going to buy your book.
So I'm really curious about this idea that you have, Lucinda, of those 3 things: great writing, a big idea, and a platform. You only need 2. Mm-hmm. So is there some advantage to an author who has a platform above someone who only, I don't know. I guess I'm pushing back. Like, this feels like a myth to me. What I would believe is you have to have a platform. So really beefing up that marketing side before you get to the proposal process. So tell me why I'm wrong. I'd love to know.
No, I think that's great. I mean, we hope that every author is a marketer, but the reason you have the vibrant business you do, Becky, is because you help authors with that. And the number of authors that come to me and say, I'm not a self-promoter and I can't do this and I need help, or haven't done it yet, but I plan to when the book is out. marketing, whether you're writing a novel, whether you're writing a business book, is so super important. But I also believe, and this, certainly allows for the opportunity for anyone to engage you along the way in this process, that if there is a really standout, fresh idea, and the person has either terrific writing skills or is able to employ a writer who can bring that technical training, that editors will be swayed. I mean, they will be touched in their hearts and in their minds by what the potential of this book could be and how they can bring marketing to the table, as well as guide the author in some best practices.
So there's some hope for those authors who have not yet invested in the platform.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for fiction, I don't know if we have fiction writers here today, but it's a different game. So that is more about, where have you published before? Like, what literary journals, or have you, do you have some sort of affiliation with the journal online or that you write for? It's like sort of like, where do you have an MFA or do you not? Are you connected with other authors who can blurb for you? Fiction is so much about the beauty of what's on the page. If there's in nonfiction, if there's a platform and you're an expert, publishers may be more inclined to just sort of say, well, we'll figure out the writing together. But the platform's really irresistible.
Got it. So how do you know when you have the right big idea?
Let me pull up my notes here because I have a lot of ways to approach this question. I'll start with the mistakes. Too many writers will write a pitch that's like a lengthy synopsis. I look at it, I still can't tell what the book is about. What they've failed to do is the elevator pitch. What is the book in 2 to 3 lines or less? You think of Marie Kondo's success, spark joy. Well, that's 2 words and it just went viral, right? Everyone understands what that means. It's accessible. So I think when we talk about big idea books, there has to be a clear degree of accessibility and immediacy. Then, we've also seen way too much. Again, I'm going through mistakes so we can, don't do this so you know what to do. Memoirs posing as big idea, business books, novels, right? Everyone's got a life story to tell. It's an unimaginable amount of people want to get published and tell their life story. But to be big idea, you've got to focus first on the idea and then how your life story can be the narrative through line or supports the message. But that's not the message. So big idea means, if you're a business book, for example, that you're not too niche. So how do we figure that out? Well, you're a communications professional and you come to an agent and say, I want to write a book for communications professionals, and it's highly tactical and it's sort of, esoteric. When I read it, I pick it up. I don't work in that industry. That's niche. That's not something I'm going to go near as an agent, just because we're interested in the most mainstream books. We're interested, our log line, at least in literary, is we represent books that change the way people work, think, and live. So that can't be applicable to just one kind of professional. That should be as applicable to the executive as the stay-at-home parent. We're talking about mindset, paradigm shift, practices, beliefs. Like, that's what a big idea does. It tries to shift those fundamental misconceptions. It attempts to be surprising. So right now, to speak of trends, I think about a favorite book that I really loved by Adam Grant called Think Again. It's science-backed. It appeals to academics, but it appeals to, any curious reader. No matter what your profession is, it's about thinking again and sort of how we can appreciate challenge and skepticism and criticism. So I'm trying to think, I guess, again, with big idea and how you might pitch that to an agent. If you've done your research, as I highly suggested doing, on comps, and every comp you're finding on Amazon is a small business book published by a publisher you've never heard of, and it has 5 Amazon reviews, that's not signaling to Simon & Schuster that they need to buy this book. So if your book looks like something that's very small and niche, chances are it is. And if your book looks like again, study the Amazon description, reverse engineer that in your pitch. That's what we're all looking for. We all have to create jacket copy out of that proposal. So I think
That's
that's
really
the place.
helpful.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
I
place.
love that. So we do have a few questions that have
Please.
come into the chat. But before I go to the questions in the chat, is there anything else you think that our listeners, our viewers today need to know about what it takes to craft that standout book proposal?
Hmm. Um, I think the research, hopefully those three keys that I mentioned, platform, writing, and idea, are really helpful. I think don't shy away from the extra help. It is such a competitive market. You're pitching people blind. Maybe you don't have the contract in hand. Don't get those trusted reads. Someone who is an outside editor or has that background. You can't come to an agent and say, my mother loves this book, right? It's about like, who has sort of worked on it. I say it takes a village to launch a book. That village effort begins before you even begin pitching agents. Know what your audience craves. Like that is so applicable in business as it is in books. And I just would come to an agent with something really polished. I love a query letter. We have a number of workshops and events that guide writers in how to present, because it's not a natural, right? Like that's not a natural thing for many people. And even if it is natural because you're a marketing professional, you still don't know what agents and publishers are looking for. So that I think is a really important component, just getting into conversation with someone in the industry.
So can you explain for those who might not know what comprises a good query letter?
Sure. So it's very clearly for me up top, I want to know who that person is, because I fall in love with people before I fall in love with book ideas. So why are you credentialed and trustworthy to write this? And even if you're a novelist, like what sort of inspired you? Like what were the books that influenced you? I really believe in personal approach. If I feel like I'm getting slushed and someone says, "Dear Sir, Madam, I notice that you represent thrillers." No, I don't. It's like unbelievable the number of people who just like throw spaghetti to the wall and see what comes. No, so much more important to go to that list of 10 to 15 agents that you see they represent the kind of book you're talking about. Maybe they've called out that agent in the acknowledgments. Maybe you've seen a recent deal they've done on Publishers Marketplace, and you can write that personal note. That will be run up the flagpole. The agent that you are targeting will read the note that feels like it's written personally. So it's that personalization. It's the sort of one-line bio of who you are. Then it's what's the elevator pitch for the book. So then you unpack that. Again, the mistake many writers make. I'm going to give you the play-by-play, every bit of plot, and I still don't know what happens. So if this were a movie, how is this query letter the book trailer? And then there's sort of a call to action at the end. There's a universal promise. It's this book is going to be the next Good to Great, or I've got XYZ to support this. I've road tested this with my tribe and everyone's on board. And I've been asked for, here's one I love to hear from people. This is the most often question I receive in my speaking engagements. And this book looks to answer that. Like that to me is compelling anecdotal evidence. I'll take your word for it. And then you tell me more when we get on the phone. So those are just some of the secrets. Like there are a lot of strategies.
Sure. That's so helpful, Lucinda. So I did have a question earlier from Molly, who was wondering about whether or not agent representation is helpful for someone who's seeking a hybrid publishing solution.
Yeah, thank you for raising that, Molly. Nice to meet you. When I think of hybrid publishing, I think of pay to play. So they are asking you to share the expenses for producing the book, marketing the book, and all of the things that a publisher would ordinarily be paying you to do. So that is never my first go-to as an agent. And as an agent, I wouldn't get involved in that, because I'm not going to commission out of your pocket and the publisher. So that doesn't really apply to seeking an agent. Before I go that route, I would query agents to see if there's broader potential in your book finding a major publisher that would pay you to do it.
Perfect. And Larnell is wondering if you're looking to repurpose or revive an already published book and potentially to bring it out with a traditional publisher, can an agent be helpful in that effort?
Yes. So do two things when you query agents. One, be prepared to speak to the sales and the media success but mainly the sales numbers of that first published book. If the sales are sort of peanuts, I'll just be brutally honest as I am, an agent's not going to really want to get involved. So if that's the case, make the argument for why that happened, right? Like, this published at the wrong time and it didn't have the existing platform I do now. And here's my sort of timely spin. Here's the reason for why this needs to exist in the market now. First question a publisher will ask you in a meeting: why this book now? So I hope that's helpful. Yes, an agent can help you there, but you need to prove what's the timeliness and what's the sales track.
Sure. So Brenda's asking a question about platforms and whether or not there are specific platforms that you recommend for authors who are building audience.
Yeah, also love that question. So at Lucinda Literary, and again in our workshops, we talk about different ways that authors can be thinking about platform, because it's not getting all over social media and having 15 followers across the board. That does not signal the kind of public recognition that a publisher or agent needs to see. Focusing in, my tribe lives on Facebook, my tribe lives on LinkedIn, my tribe lives on YouTube. I've done all these podcast interviews, like whatever it is, be prepared to show numbers and engagement on a singular or two platforms. And Google visibility is everything for nonfiction. Like, the first thing an agent or publisher does who's interested in your pitch, Google that person. I see nothing, not signaling major book sales.
That's really helpful. Well, thank you so much to everyone who's attended with us today. We do have a few ways that you can stay in touch with Lucinda Literary, Lucinda herself, and the work that she and her team are doing. And so Wendy is putting into the chat for all of you a couple of next steps that you could take. And here are a couple of things you might want to consider doing. So you can subscribe to the Lucinda Literary newsletter, where Lucinda is sharing all kinds of tips and tricks as it relates to creating that standout book proposal, query letters, and all things you might need to know to attract the attention of an agent. And additionally, you may want to check out some upcoming Lucinda Literary workshops, where you can learn with a group about all of these priorities in greater detail. So Lucinda, thank you so much for investing time and sharing your expertise. Right.
This is too short. I could keep talking, and I'm a lot warmer than that. Hopefully you've learned today that I'm a lot warmer than that photo presents. So I'd love to meet some of you at our upcoming events. And thank you so much for being here and for having me, Becky.
Sure. And if you're interested in learning more about how to reach more readers with your book, my team and I last month did our first ever Reach More Readers workshop. This is a small group environment where you can join with other aspiring authors to learn all the basics of digital marketing and how to prepare that platform that Lucinda says is so important when you craft your book proposal. We have some upcoming dates, including December 2nd and 3rd. We have some dates in January, and we hope that this will become a regular offering that we can help authors through. So we encourage you to find out more about the Reach More Readers workshop. And as always, I invite you to connect with me on all the social media platforms. If you're super fast, you can even grab my phone number and send me a text message. But we look forward to more opportunities to learn with you in the future. And in case you're wondering, next month we will be back with you for December, our last book marketing webinar of the year. And our topic for December is the basics of email marketing. For those of you who want to get started with email marketing and you don't know how, we will be really going back to the very basics of that next month in our webinar event. So Lucinda, again, thank you so much. Thank you to those who joined us today, and we look forward to learning with you more in the future.